Y'all ready for this? Yeah.
What's up, Bodybuilding.com listeners? My name is Danielle Bitts, and I'm here with Easton Drake as we come to you from Miami, Florida for the latest episode of the BB.com podcast. Today we're chatting with James Newbury, four-time Australia's Fittest Man, the fifth Fittest Man at the 2019 CrossFit Games, renowned hybrid athlete, and recently signed Bodybuilding.com athlete, James Newbury. James, welcome to the pod and welcome to the team. Excited to have you here today and excited to get chatting.
Guys, so excited. Thanks for having me. Today's going to be great.
Hybrid athlete, you are crushing strongmans, Ironmans, CrossFit workouts, you name it. And now entrepreneur and founder of a couple of different things going on for you. So it's an exciting time of your life. We're excited to dig in. But first we want to kind of take it back. So tell us about where you started. Where did really athletics start? Where did kind of this journey start for you long ago?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in a family of 5 kids. So we were all into sport. My sisters were into ballet and dancing. My older brother was only 11 months older than me. So we were like basically attached at the hip constantly, and we were constantly competitive with everything, whether it was who could throw the ball the furthest, who could kick the furthest, who could run the fastest. And that started from a very young age. And I really fell in love with sport at the age of 8. I played soccer prior to this. So soccer, football, depends where you live. I played soccer from the age of like 4 through 6 to 7. And then I found athletics, which in the States, you guys call it track and field or track. So I found little athletics, which is like youngsters track. And I went out there. I sucked. I was terrible. I wasn't good at all. And I had a race, and it was against 2 twins. They were both 8 years old, and another guy. And I came last. And it was a 70-meter sprint. Came last. Didn't enjoy it. And then I didn't do well at the shot put. Didn't do well at the high jump. Didn't do well at anything. And I said to Dad after, it was super disheartened. And I said, I don't want to go back and do that. That doesn't sound like fun at all. And he's like, I think you should go out and give it another go. And I was adamant that I wasn't going back. And all my brothers and sisters came with me as well. Josh had a good time. Georgia had a good time. Julie had a good time. Jack did really well. He was in like I think they called it teeny tots or something like that. And he was only, 4 years old. And I ended up going back the next weekend, went back the next Sunday. And I just started school in Adelaide at the time. So I was in year 3, grade 3. And a girl that I'd met during that week at school, her dad was into cycling, triathlon, all that type of stuff. And he came out and he said, hey, James, I saw you going to school with Steph. I'm going to give you some tips on your running. And I was like, okay, cool. And I said, yeah, sure. And he said, when you go running, and he said, when you're running down the track and you're doing your 100 meters, all I want you to do is focus on a spot past the finish line. And I want you to focus on that and don't take your eyes off it. Don't look left or right. And I want you to keep your chest up and your back straight. And he goes, and then just pump the arms. I was like, okay. And that's all I thought about. So getting ready for this race, thinking I was going to get flogged again. I just stared at one spot, which was a tree beyond the line, stared at that spot, kept my chest upright, ended up winning my race, and ended up winning my race by a long way. And I was just like, and I was racing the same 3 people. I was racing the 2 twins and this other fella, Shane. And I don't even know how I still remember those names. That was so long ago now. That was like 22 years ago. And I ended up winning this race, and I got hooked on winning. I was like, oh my God, if I can go from coming last to winning just by giving a tip or a skill piece or something to focus on, I was like, I can do that with everything. This is how I go from losing to winning. Just get a tip, ask a question, find out more information. Ended up doing that with shot put, high jump, long jump, 1500, 800. Ended up just cleaning up everything, and I was addicted to it. And that was the turning point. That second weekend of little athletics was the turning point. That's what got me addicted to being competitive at competition. And then from there, I moved into rugby league. I played rugby league from about age 12 onwards, and even still as an adult, but I think more predominantly as a junior, when you're playing sport and when you're playing, say, American football, or you're playing soccer, or you're playing any of these sports where you have to run, if you've got speed, you're dangerous on the field, no matter what it is. If you're fast, you're good. And you can pick up the skills. You can learn how to catch. You can learn how to do all those types of things. But if you're speedy, you're going to do well, and you're valuable to a team. Mm-hmm. So I came from an athletics background, and I was fairly fast for my age at the time. And then from there, I ended up, scoring lots of points for the team. It was basically just running around the opposition. And if they couldn't catch me, great, perfect, I'd make some points up. So then I got addicted to that, and then being a part of a team and getting stuck into that stuff. And whilst I went to, states for athletics and stuff all through this period of time through, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, went there, my best event was shot put out of nowhere. Like I was the smallest kid there, but just had good technique. So I focused on technique. My uncle bought me a shot put. I was practicing in the backyard, creating divots all through the backyard, but Dad was cool with it because I was doing something athletic and outside. And then my dad made this apparatus in the backyard with a fishing rod so I could practice my high jump. And it was like a fishing rod that went up on like a 45-degree angle. And when I could run up and do my run in to touch this piece of plastic hanging from the end of the fishing line, I would just wind it up a little bit and see if I could run up and touch that. So it was getting me used to figuring out how to jump a little bit higher and work on my power out of my left leg. So doing all these things, I figured out over time, and this didn't hit me straight away, this happened years later, that training was the thing that set me apart. So I ended up just becoming addicted to the process of training, and that's what I really enjoyed. And I remember having this conversation. My number one thing was, if I just train really hard, I'll be a better athlete. Train. So I'd get up before school, and I started doing that from ages 13, 14. When I went to high school, I'd get up and go to the local leisure centre where the pool was, and they had a gym, and I'd start working out there. Through that whole time, I was just like, if I'm just committed to doing the job that I have to do, laser focus constantly, I'll be able to set myself apart from the rest. And so when I had the opportunity to go to the Australian Institute of Sport and be part of their rugby league team, I lapped that up. I listened to the coaches. They asked us to do reports of our training weeks. They had a system that we had to follow. And not tooting my own horn here, but I think I was the only kid who actually filled in their thing every week on week. Because I remember Brian Johnson, the guy who was running the program at the time, I was a 14-year-old kid, and he goes, you know why you're getting in the team? Because they did a cut process, and I didn't get cut and made the squad. He goes, you're getting in because you filled out your form every Friday night at the same time and for like months on end. And I was like, okay, cool. So I knew that there was a training side of things, and then there was also an expectation. If you wanted to be a professional athlete, it required more than just training. It required planning, it required structure, you had to set boundaries, and it took more than that. And that was also something that I learned along the way from a young age, that if you wanted it, you kind of had to commit in all areas and kind of put the blinders on for everything else. And in a sense, it does become selfish, but if you want to be successful there, that's what has worked for me. So then from there, I actually got contacted by a guy in Adelaide where I was living. I'd actually moved to Sydney to play football. I wanted to still be a rugby league player. That's all I wanted to do. I got contacted by a guy in Adelaide who was running a CrossFit gym. And he said, hey, mate, I just saw you moved to Sydney to play rugby league. You should go check out a CrossFit gym. It'll be a great off-season program for you to do to get prepped for your season. And I was like, cool, what is it? And he's like, oh, it's this functional fitness thing. And I said, okay, cool, I'll go check it out. So I got there, and I was in Sydney by myself. I had no one to hang out with and nothing to do. So I just emailed a couple of CrossFit gyms and said, hey, a friend of mine from Adelaide said, come in, check this stuff out. I'm not working. I'm here playing footy. Can I like clean the toilets and mop the floors for a gym membership? And I was 20 at the time. And I had one guy write back. And luckily enough, that guy who wrote back was the national director of our regionals competition. And he said, yeah, mate, no problem. And he owned a gym. And he said, hey, I've got no spots available for coaching or anything like that, but if you come in, I'd just like to meet you anyway. And then I walked in and he goes, so if you're keen to mop the floors after your session every day and you're keen to do the toilets on a Wednesday night, he goes, you can have a gym membership. And I was like, done. So then I started going in at midday, and then actually chucked me into a workout then on the spot. He's like, you're going to do this workout? I was like, oh, I didn't come prepared. He's like, jumping in. And then I did it, was absolutely hammered from it. I was like, okay, whatever this program is, I have to do more of it, because that hurt me in a way that no 3K time trial or 10K run had hurt me before. I was like, okay, I like lifting weights and I like running, but lifting weights and running and burping and jumping over boxes and doing wall balls and then going for a run and then coming back in and doing pull-ups as quick as I possibly can, that just gets you in a different way. And I was like, okay, wow, this is cool. So then from there, I played my season. I'd rather be at the CrossFit gym. And so then I just made the transition, decided in my head that I was just going to go black and white. I was going to stop. I was like, this light bulb moment.
The seed was planted.
Exactly. The seed was planted, and I was like, and this is not something that I'd actually thought before. I don't have to play rugby league, because that's what I'd set myself up for since I was 13 years old, that was the path.
Right.
And I didn't even basically just in my mind created a plan. And the plan was, I'm going to go work in the mining industry. I'm going to go out and find a job somewhere, whatever it may be. It could cleaning, whatever, but they were good pay. I'm going to do that. I'm going to buy myself a block of land. I'm going to build a duplex with a mate, and we're going to sell it. We're going to do that a couple of times. I'm going to set up my own gym. I got about a year into doing that, decided that industry was not for me at all. But we did buy the block of land, we did subdivide it, and then I just thought, you know what, I'm skipping all this. I'm just going to open the gym. And so then I saved up just enough money, actually not quite enough money. I had to borrow some off my brother to get the gym set up. But I think I set the gym up for about $21,000 or something like that. That's what I saved up in that year to go and do it. And I opened a gym, started loving it. I just wanted to coach. I wanted to train. I liked the lifestyle. And here we are.
So that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
It sounds like it was a pretty even 50-50 split between extreme discipline at a very young age and almost a hyperfixation, right? You kind of set your goals and there was nothing that was going to stop you to reach those goals, right? But also the support system. I mean, you're talking about your uncle and your dad and just the support that you got from your family. Not everybody is blessed in that way, right? So talk a little bit about the support system that you had throughout, from age 9 and above, right? And just talk about that kind of that discipline that kind of set you apart, because that's something that not many people discover at that young of an age, let alone in their life sometimes, right?
Totally. And I was completely blessed with having my mum and dad that were just willing to go to the nth degree to make sure all of us kids got to sport. So if Julia and Georgia and Jack had to go to dance at 4:30 or 4:45 on Monday night, and then Josh and I had to go to football training at 5 p.m. Mum might be out dropping the girls and Jack there, and then dropping me and Josh, coming home, grabbing me and Josh and dropping us there, and then going back and picking them up. And they did that every night of the week. It was like Monday through Friday. So I don't know how they did it. Like, I look at that now and think, yeah, that's discipline. Like, that's where the mentality comes from. And Dad said to me one day, imagine if you trained. And I was like, what's that? And he's just like, well, what you do on Sunday, but you do more often. And I was like, oh yeah, cool concept. And he goes, he said, if you did that, those other boys that are beating you, that's what they're doing. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I said to him, can you make me train? When you come home from work, can you make me train? Can you say, hey, James, go and train, and kind of set it up? And he goes, if you want to train, you'll do it yourself. And I was like, okay, sweet. I was like, can you help me mark out a 400-meter track in the street? And he was like, yes. So he came out, got the car, we measured out this track with the car and the little tick over on the odometer. We measured out a 200-meter track, we stepped out a 100-meter track, and we measured a 400-meter track. And then he just said, hey, he got me a watch that had a stopwatch on it, and I could just time myself, and I'll just run it in the street. So I did that, maybe once or twice a week as on top. And then I started seeing results. And then my uncle brought me a shot put. And then he brought me a larger shot put for the age group above. So I was always throwing something a little bit heavier. And then Dad built that, the high jump in the backyard. And what else did we do? Oh, we had discuses and javelins and all these types of things. I'd go down to the local oval and throw javelin. And then, I was just kind of just making do with what I had. And I really enjoyed it, and it wasn't anything preset, like structured like these days. It was just like go out and I'd throw for 15 minutes, or I'd go out and I'd jump for 15 minutes. I'd say Dad would just be like, hey, just do 20 jumps and then call it. Do 20 jumps, then go out the front, do your 100, do a 200, do a 400, and that's it. And then from there, those types of little lessons, if you want to train, you'll do it yourself. And that was like self-motivating for me to be like, yeah, well, if I want to do it, I've got to do it myself. I can't rely on someone to motivate me to get it done. And that stuck with me forever, because anytime, like, not all days are good in the gym. Probably there's this rule of thirds that I heard, and it does actually fit very well with me. And it's like, if you're feeling really, really, really good and you're hitting PRs, 33% of the time, that's good. If you're feeling okay 33% of the time and you're feeling like trash 33% of the time, you're probably in a good place, because everything's balanced. If we are too far to one end of that spectrum, we're either overtraining, undertraining, or not trying hard enough. So we want to be in that cozy spot where we're having weeks where we're crushing it. weeks where we're feeling pretty run down and beat because then we're getting adaptation, and then weeks where we're just, we're just hitting our numbers and getting it right on point. So we can fluctuate between there in terms of, on a daily basis, like one day might be okay or 2 days might be okay, and then you get a day where you're feeling beat down, then you have a rest day and you come back and you feel amazing. That's probably a good place to be. So that's something that's monitorable. We can feel that, and when you become more in tune or intuitive with how your body feels and how your body responds to certain stimulus, then you can make good decisions on, okay, is this a day where we go hard or is this a day where we decrease the intensity? So these are all good lessons.
Love it. Fast track us from 2019 regionals. Not anticipating yourself to perform as well as you did. Tell us about that moment, what clicked for you there, and tell us kind of the expedited timeline between 2019 and today in the sport of CrossFit for you.
Totally. So to preface 2019, I'll have to quickly touch on 2016, 17, 18. Didn't feel great in 2016. Thought I came in super prepared. Wasn't as prepared as what I thought. Came away from it thinking, cool, oh well, that's an experience. Let's just put that somewhere in the back of my mind. Let's draw on it when I need to, and then let's go into 2017 and crush. 2017 was the first year that I won nationals in the CrossFit for Australia. And I felt on fire. I was like, I feel untouchable in 2017. Got to the CrossFit Games, same deal. Placed worse than I did in 2016. And I couldn't comprehend why. I was like, I feel so much better. I've done so much more training. I could have not have jammed in any more training than what I did. Why?
Did you feel like you were equal parts endurance trained and strength trained as well?
Good question, because this is where this has kind of come down to, is I felt very lacking in the endurance side of things when I went into the CrossFit Games. We were focusing a lot on trying to get my weaknesses up to a standard that were on point with where they needed to be for the CrossFit Games. But what that did was it took my strengths and lowered them, and it took my weaknesses and brought them up minutely. And then when I got there, I had nothing. I had no killer punch. There was nothing to keep me going for the weekend. I was kind of just averagely ticking along throughout every event. So none of it was really motivating for me at any point. Everything was just hard. Everything was just hard. My strengths weren't great. My weaknesses weren't great. So I was just like, eh. And that happened through the 2017 games. I went to 2018, and this is the first year that I trained with Tia and Shane. And this was my most flawless year at the Nationals. I think out of like the 6 events, I won 3, and then the other 3 I came top 3 or top 4 in. So I felt in that year, I felt even more untouchable. I was like, okay, we're on here. This is going to be a great year. This is, Tia has just come away from winning the CrossFit Games. I'm training with the best in the world. We have access to the best coaching, all that type of stuff. We're on point here. And then I just couldn't figure out what it was that kind of went wrong in 2018 at the Games. I did get my best ever placing. I placed 18th that year, but it wasn't the top 10 what I wanted. I wanted a top 10 finish and ideally a top 5 finish. That would be like, okay, that would have been made, done, everything. But it just didn't come together. Couldn't figure out what it was. And I felt mega fit, fittest I'd ever felt. And then, I kind of stepped away after that season and thought, I don't think I'll compete. I was like, maybe I'll focus on something else, because a lot of other things fire me up. Like I love to surf. I love to work on business. I like other things other than CrossFit. And it's like, maybe I'll do something else. So I kind of just took a bit of a break. And then it rolled around to the 2019 season. I was like, you know what? I'll just have another run and see how we go. I ended up contacting a lady named Michelle Laton, and she was coaching Pat Bellner, who'd podiumed at the Games in his rookie season and then podiumed again and again. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, would you mind coaching me? I said, I'm Shane and Tia have moved to the States. We're going to be on different time schedules. It's going to be hard to work around training. Would you be interested in coaching me via correspondence? And she was like, yeah, sure. So jumped on board with Michelle and just did the training, just ticked along, just got it done and didn't think much of it really. And I think the program was just really on point for me. I think that's what kind of separated. The program just suited me really well. I wasn't overtrained. I wasn't undertrained. I was getting the stimulus I needed to get the adaptation. And then she invited me out to Montreal to do a training camp before the Games. I qualified, I won the Nationals again, fairly unexpectedly, because I only started training for it 6 weeks before it started. I was just like, I'll take a break after the Games, and then kind of just continued my break. Can keep having a break, and then kind of contacted Michelle and said, hey, can we do something? She's like, yep. She goes, your sanctionals is like 6 or 7 weeks away, right? And I was like, yeah, it's okay, we'll figure it out.
You probably needed the physical and mental rest that you got out of that time is probably what is going to benefit the next part of the story that you're about to tell.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So I went into 2019 with zero expectation, and all I wanted to do, my goal for that season was to have more than 50% of the time and the memories of the CrossFit Games in 2019 as good memories, rather than 90% of them being as like, oh my God, that hurt really bad and I didn't do very well. So that's all I wanted. I just wanted to do 50% good, and I didn't really mind. I'd been there. I didn't live up to my own expectations in 16, 17, and 18. What have I got to lose in 2019? So I just went in there with the mentality of be a little reckless, roll the dice a little bit more, and just send it as much as possible. And if I get a win, great. And then if I get a last place, who cares? And that's kind of how I approached that season. And with the training, everything when we got to the training camp did perfectly. My taper was the best taper I've ever done. And I got out there on the first event, felt fantastic. I think I finished fourth in the first event out of 140. And that set me up for a really good weekend. And then the next event, which wasn't my jam, I think I got sixth. And that was out of like 80. And I was like, wow, this is not my jam either. And that was like a rowing, kettlebell, and a handstand walk workout, which is, I would have put myself in the bottom half of that pack and ended up getting sixth. And I was like, and that was it. Like after those two events, and I got 2 top 7 finishes, and I might have gotten maybe one. I don't think in any of those, I think maybe in 2018, I maybe got one top 5 finish, and the rest were all like 10 through 30. And I was like, okay, wow, well, maybe what we did was great. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to roll with this, and I'm just going to keep approaching every workout. So I could have gone one or two ways here. I could have taken that as, okay, now you're in a good position, just be careful. Or I could have taken that as, let's just keep sending it and just hope for the best, fingers crossed. And that's what I did. I just fingers crossed everything and just said, you know what, let's just send it a bit more than you'd like. And let's see how good your fitness is right now. And so every event that just popped up, it just kept hitting good numbers. And then by leading into, I think, the 5th event, I technically was sitting in first place. So at the CrossFit Games in 2019, we were going into the sled sprint event. Matt Fraser had lost a sandbag in the 6 kilometer run. We had a 4 by 1,500 meter runs with a pack, and you had to add weight to the pack every single time you went around a 1,500 meters. And one of his packs fell out, so we got a penalty. But he didn't receive that penalty until after the next event. So technically, leading into the sprint event, the sled sprint bar muscle up event, I was sitting in number 1. And I didn't know that until after the games had finished. One of the statistics guys came up to me and said, hey, did you know that you're actually sitting in number 1 at that point at time? I was like, no. Where's my leader's jersey? This is what I want. This is what I came for. And yeah, so basically from there, I just was getting top 5 finishes constantly all weekend. And I was just like, wow, I'm in position to not get cut at all and finish the weekend in a top 10 finish. And then it got to the final cut position, and I was sitting like 4th or something like that, and 4th or 3rd. And I was like, I'm going to be here all weekend. I'm going to be in top 10. And then after that, pressure was off. So regardless of what happened from Saturday onwards, I was top 10 finish. There's no worse that I could have done because everybody had been cut, and we only had 10 athletes to finish the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And I was like, all right, here we go. So I can just start sending it even more. So there was less on my mind. It was more just about having fun at that point. And every competition that I had a smile on my face and I was having a good time and having fun was all the competitions that I did really well in. So competitions where I'm laughing, taking it easy, and then just going out and just doing what I do every day. And then all these events just started rolling through, and they're all pretty good finishes. There was one event that I really wanted to win, and Michelle said, what event do you want to win this year? And I said, the swim event. I want to win the swim. That's like, if I could just win that one, I'd be stoked. Unfortunately, Matt McLeod, another Aussie, who is a jet in the water, an absolute fish, he also made the top 10. Good on him. But he was in the water with me, and he absolutely demolished me in the swim, and I came second. So I lost that, but then I did get a win in, what was it? It was called, I should remember this because it gets brought up all the time. It was an assault bike workout. And yeah, it was a full send on the assault bike and toes through rings. So I ended up getting an event win too. So that whole CrossFit Games, 98% of it, I enjoyed. And that was my goal, was to enjoy more than 50%. So I vastly crushed that goal. But then I also got to, end up finishing the weekend in 5th place. And that was enough for me to go, take a bit of a sigh and be like, okay, weight's off the shoulders now. Anything you do from here is kind of just icing on the cake.
So again, the rest, both mental, physical, having fun. I think you said fun 5+ times in that story, right? And just kind of alleviating the self-inflicted stress that it seems like you were putting on yourself for those years prior. Talk a little bit about kind of burnout, right? When it comes to physical and mental burnout, when you're a competitive athlete, when you're a professional athlete in CrossFit, Ironman, whatever the case may be. Talk about that. Talk about now what you've learned from those years of competition and how you channel that now as a competitor across all sports.
Totally. Burnout is something that is spoken about a lot, but actually figuring out what burnout is for each individual person is a little bit different. For me, I was feeling very unmotivated to do anything. After the 2017 CrossFit Games, where I wasn't enjoying myself that I thought everybody expected of me, but all people expected of me was just have fun, go out there. We just love seeing you out there. And I put it as like, no, you have to go out there and you have to win. And if you don't win, they're going to ask questions why. And they're going to figure out, they're going to think you're weak or you haven't trained or you haven't done this right, or everyone has this idea that you should be doing this type of training. And I took all those things that were well out of my control and I put them as a burden on my shoulders. And that was something that just happened subconsciously that I didn't even think about at the time. But I now can look at those things and like, okay, why am I feeling this way? What are my controllables? What do I want to achieve? And I can look at it from, an outside perspective. And by no means am I perfect at it yet. And maybe I never will be. But now I can see the things that will show up in the way that I carry myself throughout the day, the way that I feel at nighttime, the way that I sleep. And if these things start to go off, I know that I'm either stressing myself too much mentally or physically, or they will manifest in different ways. I'll be really irritable. I'll be feeling very unmotivated. I won't be myself. I'll be snappy. I'm usually pretty bright and bubbly. I've got tons of patience. And then when I start having a lot less patience and things don't work out that way, I was like, okay, what do you need to do? And if it's a point where I need to say to some of my close friends and family, hey, you got to give me like 3 days. I need 3 days or 2 days or a day. Give me a day. And then get back in track with where my boundaries are set. And usually it just comes down to, have I set boundaries? Have I set these boundaries and then have I crossed my boundaries? And that's it. That's pretty much plain and simple. If you put structure in place and you're starting to feel off, you've likely just extended those boundaries or you've just crossed them. Saying yes too much. Saying no was one of the biggest things that I ever learned. I said, say yes to everything. And it'd be to the point where I'd be like, yes, I will come to that meeting at that time. And then I'll be in the gym at 11 p.m. trying to finish off my training to that point. And I'd be like, no, it's okay. And then getting up to coach 5:30 class. So learning how to say no was huge for me. But for me, those were the types of things that kind of popped up when I was feeling burnt out and stressed. But what I did learn from burning out pretty bad and not wanting to ever compete again or do anything in terms of sport was that the rest and recovery side of things really plays a big role in where your performance leads you and how well you like to carry yourself emotionally. And I think if you have a really good emotional state, you're going to do way better. And that was a simple difference between 2018 and 2019 was, probably, if you look at all the metrics of how fit you are, VO2 max, lactic threshold, how strong you are, what the numbers were showing, I was pretty well, almost identical, I would say. It'd be very close. You wouldn't be able to really tell on a piece of paper or who's fitter. But the difference was I went into 2019 super fresh, different mindset. And that mindset was roll the dice, man. You've got nothing to lose. And that was the difference for me.
Define stress. So for you, stress, sometimes it can be controllable, sometimes it's not, right? We have situations that cause extreme stress. They disrupt our routine. And sometimes the best thing that we can do is just try the next day to get back on track and get back to that routine. But for you, when that does happen, when something does penetrate, say, that bubble of sanity, right? What are the tools in your kit that you use to get back to that, physical, mental, et cetera? What do you use to get back on track?
Absolutely. So the first thing when I talk to people about stress or improving performance and managing that bucket of stress that they're building up either physically or emotionally is sleep. If you can control your sleep, that's the first thing that I'll usually ask them. It's like, how's your sleep been? And they usually say terrible. It's like, okay, well, let's address that first. So, and that's what I do for myself. It's like, how's my sleep been? Have I been on point? Like, for instance, this week has been manic and crazy and my sleep hasn't been on point. So I know during the day, sleep hasn't been on point. So if you do get into a stressful situation, here is something else you can do to try and manage that. And that's usually breath. So once you tackle sleep, and that's the first priority, is like, okay, well, I need to rein in my sleep and get that sorted out. And for most people, and I'll get onto breath in a second, but for most people, things that they can focus on when they're looking at sleep is make sure that your sleep routine is then reset. So a nighttime routine, bedtime, going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time. That's one of the things. Number 2 is making sure your room is completely dark. If you can keep it completely dark, you're going to have a much more restful sleep. Temperature is key. Try and keep it between that, I'm not sure in Fahrenheit, but looking at around about 17 to 19.5 degrees C. The other thing is sound, making sure it's completely silent. I sleep so well in hotels because they're so far away from the ground and cars and things like that. I can sleep so deeply, and they're usually pitch black. So there are some things that you can do to improve your sleep. Now, for breath, if you don't get good sleep, some things that you can do to help combat that and still keep you in a good mindset is breath and hydration. So making sure that you're up on your hydration, you're drinking good quality water. Yeah, I don't like to drink from a tap. I like to drink spring water. It just makes me feel better. I don't like the smell of chlorine or anything in my water. It just doesn't sit well with me. And then breath. So if I get a bad night's sleep and I'm getting in a stressful situation, I just go back to nose breathing. So I'll do a box breathing method. It's literally just 5 inhale, 5 hold, 5 exhale, 5 hold. And I'll repeat that for a handful of rounds. And that'll make me feel calm and collected. I'll be in fight or flight and I'll instantly revert back to that parasympathetic rest and digest. And that's a really good way to help me manage stress if I'm caught out late and I have to stay up, or I've got scheduled appointments or whatever they may be. That's a really good way for me just to combat that until I have the ability to rein it in. And then, but I have to make a conscious effort to rein it in. Like, okay, so it's like you can say no to something, that's fine. You can do it. And once you get to that point, it's like you need to recognize it, then you need to take action. It's like, okay, cool. Well, that's a non-negotiable. That's a non-negotiable. That is negotiable. No. And then get back on track and you'll feel so much better for it. And that's just about navigating how you communicate. And if at the end of the day you suck at communicating, a lot of these things is like your own worst enemy. So if you suck at communicating, then that becomes tough. So maybe for someone who's dealing with stress and they, either want to progress in a really hectic career, or they want to, manage their relationship better, or they want to, and I'm no expert in managing career relationships or anything else apart from sports. Sports is kind of my thing, but I guess it all goes hand in hand. But communication is key, and you can get a lot done. You can decrease and manage a lot of stress just with communication. So you want to decrease your stress, probably get better at communicating. That's a really good way to start combating that stuff straight away.
Well, and I think communicating with yourself is a part of it too. How do you train yourself? I mean, it takes years, right? Just to start to understand what are those, let's call them triggers, right? What is it that's going to get my heart rate up? Okay, how do I catch myself? My breathing has gotten a little more shallow. How do you start to feel that creeping into your body and put a stop to it before you get to a level 10? Things like wearables. These days, that has been a huge game changer in just helping people develop daily habits, journaling, things of that nature. But for you personally, what do you think has helped the most in starting to understand what's going to bring you to that level and what you can do to help yourself not get to that level?
One thing that I did probably would have been maybe 2 or 3 years ago is I turned my phone onto silent constantly. So it's not beeping at me. And that's one thing, it's like this little tug. Every time that thing goes off, it's an immediate stress, anxiety response. Like, oh, what is that?
Everybody listening at HQ, I do the same, and that is why I am delayed sometimes.
And that's okay, but because I feel like if you put yourself in a position, and this is own worst enemy, if you put yourself in a position where you are contactable all the time, you are going to drop the ball so much it's not even funny. And if you're dropping the ball, then you don't get as good a work done. And then you're still in the same position with your work colleagues, your relationships, and your training. You need to be uncontactable. So a really good way to combat some of this stuff is unplugging. Going into a space where you can not be contacted via email, via phone call, via text message. People can't rock up. So surfing for me is great. There's no phone out there. I'll take my watch off, or it won't be in connection. So I won't be getting buzzed every time someone wants to send me an email or a text message. Getting out in the ocean, you're in the salty water, you're out in the sun, you're doing something you enjoy. For me, I enjoy it. And yeah, you're unplugging. You're unplugging from what is probably so far from what we are, we're born to do naturally, which is be amongst nature and, basically do the things to just keep us living. We're doing all these other things, which can then just add stress to your bucket. So just doing things that you enjoy, whatever they may be. For me, it's surfing. I also like riding my bike. I like doing all these other things. I like to get outdoors. I like to do fun stuff with friends. So things that they don't feel like a drag. So getting yourself, and the other thing that is something that's very passive that I really enjoy doing too is floating. Floating is a really cool thing. If you guys have not tried floating, I highly recommend it. At least give it 3 goes. You'll probably not enjoy it on the first go. I loved it on my first go, which is why I've done so many. I've got one in my house. But getting into a float tank or getting a float tank is a really good way to unplug, because you're not contactable. It's completely silent. It's body temperature. You're floating in like 300 kilos or 600 pounds of magnesium, and you're just soaking up the good energy, and you can literally just switch off. And I have some of my best ideas in there. So that kind of just helps me to down-regulate myself from stressful environments.
Talk about how nutrition, let's switch gears to nutrition, not only how that can have an effect on your stress levels and your behavioral patterns, but just talk about nutrition for you. What does that look like on a daily basis? What do you notice if you slip up a little bit? Which we all do. It all happens, whether we're traveling, whether we're just having an off week. Some people tend to go to food if they're just having a really stressful situation, right? That's just a human behavior and a pattern that we all experience. But talk about what you notice when you're not eating your best or when you're not eating to your routine, and then tell us what that routine does look like. Tell us what the day-to-day James Newbury diet does look like.
Totally. So for those that don't know, I'm 100% plant-based. I've been vegan for 3 years now. I started in 2019 and absolutely love it. Like I did it for other reasons other than health. But for me, I haven't noticed any significant decrease or increase in the way that I feel. It hasn't been like, oh my God, I feel like superhuman. It's not like that. I know a lot of people do say that, and then other people say they feel like trash. Neither. I feel the same way that I did the day before I did it, before I transitioned, to how I feel now. I feel exactly the same. So that's just getting one thing out of the way there.
What prompted you? To make the switch?
Totally. So for me, I have always struggled with the idea of putting an animal in pain. I always hated, if I stepped on my dog's paw, stress through the roof. Felt so
have
bad.
To take the rest of the day off.
Oh, just
have to call out for the day.
Yeah, and people might think it's soft, but I feel for the animals that don't have almost a voice to speak about where they are. I don't like the idea that they're kept in terrible conditions. I don't like the idea that they can feel emotion. They're feeling sadness. They're feeling fear. They're feeling stress. They're having they're having their babies taken away from them so early. We're putting them in all these cramped positions. They're not free. They're in this constant state of torture, and I couldn't bring myself to keep contributing to an industry that I did not agree with at all. That was the main thing. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it should be done, and I'm not going to force that in any of my socials or even in my common conversation with everybody. I'm never going to force that down anyone's throat at all. I will just keep doing my thing, and hopefully people are just like, oh, cool. So you can still run marathons and you can still total, 600 plus kilos in a powerlifting competition, and you can do it all at the same time and be plant-based. Oh, cool. That's actually a thing you can do. That's all I want to do. And I think the fear for a lot of people is, I just couldn't do that because I'd lose so much muscle. I'd get so weak, or I'd get frail. It's not the case. It's not the case. You can navigate it really, really well if you take the time to do it. And if you care enough about how you'd make another living thing feel, you'll take the time to do it. That's it. Pure and simple. I was very ignorant towards it for many years because I didn't think it was possible. I was selfish to the point where I didn't want to sacrifice my performance, and I just turned a blind eye. And got to the point where I was sitting in my car at a set of traffic lights. I looked to my left and there was a big truck and it was full of sheep and they're all crammed up to the side. They didn't look comfortable at all. I hate being crammed in the car, especially when you're sitting in the back seat and you've got 3 people in the back. It doesn't feel good. Sitting on a plane, hate it. And I thought, oh my God, we're doing this all the time to these animals. That's it, done. Went to the shop, got some tofu, got some tempeh, I was good. And I haven't looked back since. It wasn't hard. For me, it was just black and white, bang, done. And I haven't even thought about eating anything else since then. I can make all the food that I really enjoy in a different way now. And it just took like a couple of months of learning. Like it's just basically you're taking everything that you've learned for the last 20 years, 25 years, and you're just going, okay, cool. So instead of my chicken, I'll just have tempeh. Nice fermented food. It's got good protein. You've got good probiotics and prebiotics and postbiotics. Then you've got tofu, good amount of protein. You've got all these other things that you can use to give you the protein that you think you require, and you just make it in a different way and you'll figure it out. And at the start, you might find some stuff that someone says, hey, go try this, and you taste it and you're like, oh my God, that's disgusting. I don't want to eat that at all. Cool. Go to the next one. There'll be another brand that does something better. And nowadays it's so accessible to do it. So like we've got all the options we possibly can have. And you can make them all. Yeah, I can still make my favorite meals. I can still make my pancakes. I can still do all that type of stuff, and I can still have my treats. And there are some cafes around doing some amazing things that are just doing like out of this world stuff. So for me, that was my transition period. That's why I loved it so much, is because I felt like not only could I still maintain and do the things I wanted to do athletically, but I also wasn't contributing as much destruction and pain and anguish to another living sentient being. And that was the main thing. That was it.
What a lot of people don't realize, that transition, you open up an entire different world of foods. And not even an entirely different world. You open up foods that you maybe never even would have even given the time of day
100%.
Prior before. So I mean, even myself, I went from probably consuming the same 5 vegetables every single week. It was your broccoli, your asparagus, your beans, etc. I eat 35 plants in a week now to 40 different plants, right? Just diversifying your diet and expanding what we typically think of as your American diet, right? Which is typically a slab of protein, a little carb, maybe some vegetables over here, right? When you open up the world of plant-based, you're experiencing so much more than you even thought was possible. Secondly, what's going to be a big topic with our audience is how do you hit the protein? You talked about tofu, you talked about tempeh. Probably a lot of people listening in or watching this right now are going to snub their nose up to those 2 proteins without realizing that tempeh and tofu can give you the same nutritional value as eating a steak. But on the taste factor, there are plenty of ways that you can prepare it, cook it, to make it taste absolutely delicious. Put it in your salads, put it as your main protein in a dish. So kind of educate people a little bit of what kind of the positive attributes, aside from more of the ethical reasons. Talk about the nutritional value they can get out of it.
Totally. Well, the thing that I think people probably overestimate is how much protein they probably need to get. And for me, I was trying to aim, let's put it in perspective. I'll give you some numbers, and this goes for the people that love numbers. I was 87 kilos, roughly 190, 195 pounds. I would participate in high intensity exercise every single day, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. I'd be doing anything from sprinting on the land, sprinting in the water, sprinting on my bike. I'd be lifting heavy weights. I'd be doing powerlifting, bench press, back squat, deadlift. I would be doing Olympic lifting. I would be doing gymnastics. I'd be doing muscle ups. I'd be doing handstand walking. I'd be doing long runs. I'd be doing long swims. I'd be doing all the things. And my protein before I went plant-based was around about 215 grams a day. That's what I was told to have.
Eating what? What was a day pre-vegan for you?
Yeah, so a day I'd be looking at, maybe eggs in the morning, eggs and bacon in the morning. Maybe at lunchtime I'd have some chicken, and at nighttime I might have some, might have a steak or more chicken or something like that. It'd be just standard, or fish or whatever have you. Like just something. It'd basically be the standard protein, animal protein of some description. It'd be some carbs. It'd be sweet potato. It would be rice. It would be gnocchi or something like that, and then it'd be some carrot and broccoli and cauliflower or something along those lines. But then when I transitioned, I decided to decrease my protein a little bit. I went to around about 160 grams a day, 150 grams a day, saw zero difference. The only difference was I was way less gassy. That's it. Way less gassy. And I was like, okay, cool. So I'm eating roughly 50 to 70 grams less protein per day and seeing zero change in my strength at all. I actually ran, so post this 2 years later after going plant-based, so about a year ago now, I did a powerlifting competition. I PR'd my back squat, I PR'd my deadlift, I PR'd my bench press. Prior to that, about 2 months before that, I also PR'd my 30-meter sprint time. So the power output was still there. I PR'd my clean and jerk. I got 160 kilo clean and jerk. I'd never hit that before. So I decreased my protein by, say, on average 60 grams per day, and then I was still hitting PRs, and I was still also running at the same time, and there was zero change. So for me, I was looking at still 85 to 87 kilos. I've stayed fairly lean all year round, and I'm having roughly 150 to 160 grams of protein a day. And I dare say there'll be some days I'll probably get 120 grams of protein, no doubt. And I do all this now intuitively and all by feel. I just know when my body wants carbohydrates. I know when it wants a mix. I know when it needs protein. I know when I've done a heavy session that day and I need extra protein. So I will intuitively know that when I go for my next meal, I have to find something that's got more protein. It might be a mix of quinoa, black beans, tempeh, and if I get in a lot, I'll eat until I'm full and then I'm good. And I'll know that I'm just getting in enough. And if I'm eating a wide variety, I'm getting a complete amino acid profile, I'm getting all the essentials I possibly need. And if I've got a healthy microbiome, I know that I'll be able to create all the other amino acids that my body can potentially need as well if I'm getting in a diverse mix of plant foods through nuts and seeds as well. So that's the key. It's just get diversity. And like you were saying, you eat 35 plants a week. What I would recommend to anyone looking to add or go towards, more of a plant-based diet, and plant-based, that's perception. So it's anyone's idea on what plant-based means for them. And for what I can see plant-based meaning could mean that you eat 90% of your each meal is plants, and then you might have 10%, which is, an animal product of some description, whether it's fish or whether it's all that type of stuff. It's up to you. But then if you can transition just to adding in more plants to your diet, you're going to be healthier. You're going to be getting in really good phytochemicals. You're going to be getting in polyphenols. You're going to be getting in more fiber. All these things go towards a nice, healthy, holistic system. And if we can make sure that we can approach this from the gut first perspective, and that's basically feeding a really good gut microbiome and making sure we're getting in that good quality fiber and polyphenols, which will just turbocharge your gut bacteria to produce all these really good postbiotics, like your short chain fatty acids, your enzymes, your organic acids, all these things that go towards keeping you healthy, then we're going to be doing a good thing. And the way that we get diversity in the gut is diversity on our plate. And so what I'll say to anyone is just start with trying to get in 20 different plants per week. Then when you feel comfy and you feel like that's achievable every week, go to 25, go to 30, go to 40. And if you can get in 40, like, holy, you're going to notice a huge change in everything. And then it's basically, because what we get caught up in is your gut microbiome it's out there for itself. It wants to eat what it likes to eat. And if you continually feed it donuts every day, it's going to be craving that sugar and you're going to get those responses. We talk about that gut-brain axis. The gut probably sends more signals to the brain than the brain does to the gut. So every time that you get hungry or you get this urge to eat, your gut's telling you, give me that sugar, give me that sugar. That's what we feed on. That's what we want. We want it. We want it. And then you feel like, I feel like a donut. I feel like a donut. If you can get to the point where you can change or transition that gut environment to eating different foods and more diversity, and we can build up a really good spectrum of bacteria in the gut, we're going to have a more holistic system down there, and we're also going to be having the gut wanting you to eat healthier foods too. It's going to be saying, hey, bro, give me a salad full of color. Give me the rainbow today. That's what I feel like. And that'll just be a consistent thing. And then that taste and that urge of what you want to eat will change. It just takes time. That transition period, maybe like 2 to 4 weeks, and you'll see a huge change. Chucking in things like chickpeas and chucking in things like a variety of beans, chucking in a variety of nuts. And what I typically do, I'll give you a rundown of a day. So I like to fast a lot. When I'm not training that much, I like to fast. My work is a priority at the moment, and training is also a priority, but I do like to get in a fast each day. I usually don't start eating till around 10 or 11 o'clock. But if I'm lifting heavy weights in the morning, I will eat. And so that looks like a bowl of oats with as many berries as I can possibly get in there. So blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, goji berries. And then I'll usually just alternate my days of nuts. So some days I'll do walnuts. Some days I'll do Brazil nuts. Some days I'll do cashews. Some days I'll do almonds. Some days I'll do something different, pine nuts maybe. And then after I have my breakfast, a couple of hours later, I might do a smoothie. Love smoothie bowls. I could live on smoothie bowls, as much color as possible. Acai bowls. It could just be banana and dragon fruit bowls. And then I'll just mix in as many different types of pepitas, so pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, really great source of iron. You can mix in tons of different stuff. You can pop in just a mixed berry mix on top. Then you can chuck in chia if you want to do chia. Like you can make a really cool chia and coconut pot, and then you're getting great omegas as well, plus tons of protein in chia too. And you mix all those into a bowl. A couple of hours later, I might have a protein shake after a workout, and it would just be, just a good quality plant-based protein. I'll mix it in with some creatine. I'll do creatine every day. For those that are wondering, I'll do 5 grams of creatine every day, regardless of the day, regardless of whether I train or not, just every day.
Why?
So creatine for me, I think obviously, as people know, it's the most studied supplement on the planet. We just know that it works. Get a really good quality creatine monohydrate, and it's something that we would typically get out of red meat. This is where all the studies were done back in the day. Is that okay? What is in the red meat that is making everyone, so good in the NFL? And luckily, my business partner knows how this all came about, and he's given me the lowdown plenty of times. And they're just like, okay, it's the creatine, sweet. And we're not getting creatine in the way that we would in plants as we would get in red meat.
Right.
So, we can get plant-based creatine. We, combine a couple of different compounds together that are plant-based compounds, and we can create creatine monohydrate. And I'll just have that every day. Really good for that reactive replenishment of our energy source in our body, basically our currency of energy, ATP. It also helps to draw in water into the muscles as well. It just helps with a multitude of things, from performance there and then, and also recovery there and then. Plus, we're also looking at a lot of studies that are showing that how much it increases cognitive function too. So we're looking at a cognitive benefit, we're looking at a performance benefit, we're looking at a recovery benefit. Pop it in there. It's good. It's not going to make you like blowed up, but it's going to make you look puffy or anything like that. I think that's a myth. Well, it does it to an extent, but it's not as to the degree of what people think. I think when they hear creatine, they think, Mr. Olympia. That's not what's going to happen.
Or what are some of the comments that we get from people about creatine, or the misconceptions rather?
How to fix the kidneys, right? Creatinine is a common misconception.
Yep.
We have the bloating is huge, right? Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing at the end of the day is hydration.
Yeah.
If you're not hydrated, bloating is going to happen, no matter what, if you're taking creatine or not. So hydration is key with creatine in anything.
I agree.
Then, with some of the other misconceptions we hear about, creatine is going to make you big. Women specifically, right? So with women, they're worried they're going to get bulky. It's not true. Yeah. And then the cognitive function is a huge piece that's coming out more and more. Even looking at dopamine, serotonin levels, happy, right? So creatine's super interesting, and we're only going to see more and more studies.
I agree completely. And I think that's one thing, if you're going plant-based, it's one thing that you could just add in, even if it's like a 2 gram or a 3 gram serving on a daily basis. It'll just, it's the insurance policy icing on the cake. You want to see extra performance. It's one of the things that we know and we've studied and we've seen great benefits in. So then that's a smoothie, bit of creatine. I'll use maple instead of honey these days. Protein, and then I might mix it in with some coconut water, something like that. And if I do feel like having something a little bit more substantial, if I know that I've got another big session later on, then I might add in a banana or 2 or 3 or 4. I love my bananas, and I also love dates too. So another really good fueling source, especially for races and especially for pre-training, dates, well, probably my favorite. Really good fiber as well. And then after that, I might do another snack of some description. It could be like, a whole wheat wrap with, I love this whole wheat wrap that I've been doing lately, which is basically just a sourdough wrap with peanut butter, seaweed, and then I'll usually just chuck in some sesame seeds, and I just wrap it up. I'm good to go. And then I'm getting in, a bit of some phytochemicals in the iodine, in the seaweed. I'm getting in some good protein in the peanut butter. I'm getting in some carbohydrates with my wrap itself. And then I'm getting in some, very, very small amount, but I'm getting in some iron and some other bits and pieces throughout my sesame seeds. So that's just a really cool snack that I might do. That'll change on a daily basis as well. And then from there, looking at dinner, I might do like a poke bowl, but instead of putting in, say, salmon or whitefish, I would just do, something fermented. So I would go like tempeh. And then I'll just always try and add in to most of my meals. I'm always just either just grabbing a fork and grabbing some kimchi or some sauerkraut out and just downing it, or putting it on my meal or putting it on my wrap. But I'm trying to get in some fermented food on a daily basis. That's one thing that I try and aim for. And I think if people were to look for, 30 different types of food, 30 different plants that they could fit in the week, make sure some of those are fermented foods too, because they will go such a long way to, making a really healthy gut microbiome work well for you. And if we can handle our gut microbiome, we're decreasing inflammation, we're creating a more holistic system, we're decreasing the amount of autoimmune responses we're going to get, which is basically an overactive immune system that's just reacting to everything that might be permeating through gut walls into our bloodstream and doing all these things that we don't want them to do. So if we can handle the gut, we're going to be handling a lot of stuff, and people just start to feel so much better.
Before we fully transition into our supplement discussion, I know everybody's eagerly waiting, and thank you for putting up with the plant-based discussion, but it's important. You said something super intriguing a couple of minutes ago. You said, the difference between vegan and plant-based, right? So most people, when they hear vegan, immediately there's, let's say, a judgment placed upon someone, right? Could be good, could be bad, whatever the case may be. Plant-based, plant-forward has become a term that's been being used more and more over the past couple of years. So being plant-based or plant-forward doesn't necessarily mean I have completely shut out all animal-based products in my life. Like you said, I'm living more of a 90-95%. If I'm home for Thanksgiving, I'm not going to deny mom's turkey. Sure. If I'm generously being hosted by a guest and there's some cheese, I'm not going to turn that dish away, right? So I think there's still a lot of public education that needs to go into when someone says they're plant-based, when someone says they're plant-forward, but also when someone says they're vegan. I think we need to do a better job at placing a little less judgment and a little more understanding of this is what works for that person. This is what it could be medically, ethically, whatever the case may be. But I think it's very important that we touched on that because we're seeing plant-based and plant-forward a little bit more. So just more so a thank you for touching on that, and thanks for a lot of great insight for our users on that piece. And thanks for sharing everything. So let's talk a little bit about supplements. Let's talk about your supplement routine, and then let's also talk about FIBO, right? And that's going to play into this plant-based discussion that we're having as well. And we have Easton, who we like to call our in-house. We actually call him Mr. BB but he's very well versed. He's our supplement go-to at Bodybuilding.com. So let's start that conversation of supplementation, how it plays a role in you as an elite athlete and pro athlete, and then get into the discussion about FIBO, because that's really something we're excited to talk about as well.
Totally. I love it. And I also love supplements too, and which is why we started this new company called Fiber. But aside from that, and which we will get into, but supplements I feel like are a really good way to cover your bases. So it's an insurance policy I like to take out on a daily basis. When I'm asking extraordinary things of my body, I'm probably going to have to give them extraordinary things to combat the amount of stress that I place on it. And eating a really diverse whole food based diet, plant-based diet, is going to do 95% of the work, surely. And then if I can add an icing on the cake there, or that extra insurance policy, that's making sure I'm getting in, some really good plant-based omegas, making sure I'm getting in a bit of extra creatine, which I wouldn't be getting in my diet, making sure I might be supplementing as a plant-based athlete with maybe some extra B12, maybe some iron if I need it, or maybe looking at the things that might be blocking my iron absorption. Am I getting in too many salicylates and oxalates and all these things that could be binding to all the things that I need to be absorbing? How can I combat that? So there might be a protocol that I might like to follow, whether it's some type of prebiotic gut matrix that could help me break down my food better, or an enzyme complex. So these are supplements that you could delve into, and I have played around with these in the past. But then also looking at protein. So typically a staple plan for myself is looking at something that's going to optimize my body to work better. I love medicinal mushrooms. I love things like reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, And there's been some really cool studies recently come out in cordyceps and how much they play a role in Akkermansia in the gut and what Akkermansia can do for us in terms of performance. So, you know, I love mushrooms. I love creatine. I love protein. I love plant-based omegas, things like rosemary oil, hemp seed oil, CBD. These things I feel like cover my bases. When I think about supplements as a staple or like the pillars that I want to work from is like, okay, protein and fats or protein and oils. I don't really feel like I need to supplement too much with carbohydrates unless I'm doing a race. I feel like I'd rather just get it from dates or bananas or fruit in general. And then, so protein and oils. So a really good wholesome omega, plant-based omega complex, and then a wholesome protein complex, which is going to give me all 9 essential amino acids. So when I look at a protein, I'm looking for at least all 9 essential aminos with really good ratios. So, for instance, what we did with fiber, we wanted to make sure we hit all those targets, and I basically gave Matt, which is my business partner with fiber, and he's a genius when it comes to formulation. I just said, dude, can you make a plant-based protein that covers all 9 essential amino acids, isn't gritty and sandy like you normally get, tastes really good, and digests well? They were the key factors that I was looking for. He's like, yes, I can. And I was like, okay, cool. Show me how you're going to do that. And
let's go.
he was just like, all right, let's go. And he like blew my mind. He blew my mind with some of the stuff that he came up with. But, you know, looking at a protein just as a standpoint, as a staple, most people like think supplements, protein. Cool. So with our supplement, with fiber and with some other plant-based companies that are doing really good stuff in the space, looking at, you know, just really good quality, wholesome supplements, even though these things are processed and we talk about eating a whole food plant-based diet as a majority factor, protein is processed, but they still have their place in a whole food plant-based diet. And we're looking at things like we use a blend of 4 different protein sources. We use organic pea, sunflower seed, pumpkin seed, and watermelon seed. And what we found by adding watermelon seed it bumped up the leucine ratio, which is something that you don't typically get in plants. Not very much anyway. And that's something that we know goes down a pathway to help us with, you know, a growth stimulus, recovery, all these types of things. So we look at the leucine factor. And then we're also looking at covering those bases of all 9 essential amino acids, which we're doing. Plus you're getting another 9 non-essential amino acids too, just as icing on the cake there. Aside from that, when we look at texture, we're looking at trying to figure out a way that we can break down. So what we find with plant protein is usually the particle size is usually a bit bigger. So they struggle to hydrate in water, unlike whey protein or whey protein isolate. They're creamy and they're fluffy and they hydrate really well. For plant protein, if we want them to hydrate to the nth degree, to make them creamy and make them smooth and nice to drink, we have to let them sit for ages. So what we did was we fine milled this protein to a smaller particle size, so it's easier to absorb the water, it's easier to rehydrate, and it is a smoother texture. Then on top of that, when we look at, and this is also good for digestion, so this is a tip for people at home. If you're having a plant protein and you do like a plant protein that's got a good taste, but you feel like it's grainy or the texture's not good, or you feel like it's just giving you some type of indigestion, if you're just putting your plant protein into a shaker of water, shaking it and downing it within 20 seconds, hasn't had enough time to hydrate, then that plays a huge role in absorption. That thing needs to be a soup by the time it gets to your stomach. Otherwise, we struggle to absorb it. Otherwise, it's going to sit in your stomach to the point where it can be absorbed because it needs to be hydrated. And that might give you some upset stomach if it's sitting there dry. You're putting dry powder in, and if you're tasting dryness in the protein shake itself, it's not yet hydrated. So
that's the case with seeds as well. So if you're taking flaxseed, they recommend if you're putting that in your smoothie, put in your milk or your liquid or whatever the case may be, throw in your flax first.
Yeah.
Let it sit there for a couple of seconds. Let it actually start kind of getting to that point that you need for the digestion, right? And then adding in the rest of your ingredients and blending. Even if it's just a couple of minutes, it's going to help with that 100%. Breakdown.
100%. And that's exactly right. Ideally, with all these things, we would just be blending them all. If we blended all our protein shakes, people would have better digestion across the board. So on top of that, we also wanted to figure out a way that we could harness the absorption or the assimilation of these nutrients that we're putting in. How can we get the most out of them? So Matt had a theory that if we could, in a way, create a fermentation process that we gave to a lab to figure out, that if we could use our plant material, ferment it in a way with some other prebiotics, that these particular probiotics that we've studied to create, optimal health or increase performance or do a lot of these digestion processes for us, if we could ferment some of that plant material with some other prebiotics in a lab, create a matrix of the pre, pro, and postbiotic complexes, dry that up, put that back into the protein, we're not only giving ourselves the bugs that are going to help break down this plant-based material, we're also giving it some extra prebiotic. But the cool thing is the postbiotics that we're getting out of this is all of the, this is all of the short chain fatty acids like butyrate. This is, potentially glutathione. This is all the things that we could potentially be getting out, the enzymes that help break these things down. This is the cool mush that usually gets put to the side and left away. But those postbiotics are probably the game changers in the big scheme of things. We can take on probiotics. We can have a probiotic capsule. We can have those probiotics, but they could be transient. They could not, be colony forming at all. They could just go in and have no space in the stomach, which is why changing your diet with the seasons is a really good way to keep your levels of gut microbiome or the gut microbiota, keep those gut bugs at a good level across the board. And so if we can harness all three aspects we talk a lot about pre and probiotics, but we don't talk a lot about postbiotics. I think it's going to be a game changer in the next few years when people start to realize the postbiotics might be doing the greatest bit of magic here. And if we can look at that and say, okay, cool, well, we can take the pre and the pro, but let's take the post too, chuck it in there as well and see how good the digestion process is. And Matt's come up with an amazing formula for this called Gut Matrix. And we put that back into our protein as well to help the assimilation and absorption of all the nutrients to the highest possible degree we possibly can think of at this point in time.
So you're actually like talking about like hydrolyzed whey, right? Like when we're talking about whey protein, hydrolyzed has pre-digestive enzymes.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
And so now you're doing that with a plant.
Mm-hmm, correct. And we haven't seen it being done to this scale before. Typically what you'll find is you might get an off-the-shelf digestive enzyme complex. That could be just, amylase, protease, whatever it might, lipase might be, whatever you're putting in there. A lot of plant proteins will put in like coconut powder or something like that. So they just might get one of those and just hope they work. And maybe they do to a degree. But we feel like this is just taking it a step further, trying to look at things a little bit more detailed, trying harder in essence, to just make sure that we're creating a wholesome. I just Matt, everything in this range that we create, and over this course of time, and he was actually the guy who brought this to my attention. Everything has to be gut orientated. If it's not going to be good for the gut, we're not doing it. And so if we can innovate each category of the supplement game to a point where they all are gut friendly and promoting gut health, not just getting by or being neutral or being a detriment to the gut, but actually being gut health promoting for a pre-workout, for a greens, for a protein, for an oil-based supplement, for a cognition-based supplement, for whatever it may be, all gut health orientated. We're doing something different and we're doing something we believe in.
I mean, what makes this so unique is one, the blend, right? So I feel like you're seeing that more and more now. So I feel like you're seeing the pea protein. A couple years ago, plant-based became huge, right? Plant-based proteins. We're seeing the pea protein. Maybe they have a B12 added to it specifically for those who choose a plant-based lifestyle. We're seeing rice blends now, but now we're starting to see the combinations. Is that because of the microbiome in mind? Is it because we're finding different combinations come with a higher protein level? What is this transition that we're seeing for plant-based proteins being one rice, one pea blend versus 3-4 different ingredients included?
I think Easton and I were talking about this the other day, and he'd have a very good idea on this too. But I feel like the ideal situation for most places these days, they're just looking for an optimal blend that'll give the most ideal protein amino acid profile ratios as what they possibly can. And whether that's a hemp mixed with rice, mixed with pea, or whether that's such an inchy protein mixed with pea and pumpkin and watermelon seed, then so be it. Then you've got almond and peanut and all these other different blends of proteins that you could source from. Then also trying to make it to a price point that works well for the consumers too, because then you could go and find a crazy algae in the middle of Germany somewhere that grows in this one spot that produces all these really cool benefits, but it's probably going to be 100 kilos it's probably going to be $100 for 100 grams. We want to try and make it accessible for everyone at the same time. So trying to figure out what's going to be the next innovative thing, be on the forefront of that, and then as people start to harness it, it's great. Share it around, because then it makes it cheaper for everybody. We can all utilize these things that we're, growing and creating, and let everyone try it. And that's, I think, same idea as what Elon talks about. He goes, everything is, open patent. You can see what he's doing, and if you can make it better, please do. It's going to be good for the world. Same kind of deal. Like, we'll share as much as we possibly can with ours. We'll keep gut matrix as tied to our chest as possible. But it's about, for those blends, finding ideal amino acid ratios and profiles for people that are just going to give them a full spectrum.
Even with your guys' watermelon, right? That's not common when you're looking in the industry. So when you brought that up the other day when we were having that conversation, I was like, okay. And then you said it bumped up the leucine. Well, that's usually what pea tends to lack when you look at regular pea proteins. So when I heard that, it was like, all right, this is different.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And what we talk about a lot as well, and Matt is a huge believer of this, and he talks about the gut microbiome and being in a state where we can keep the gut microbiome at a level where we have great diversity and we don't have one overpopulated species of bacteria in the gut. And what he talks a lot about is eating with the seasons. And if you eat with the seasons, you can create, and especially if you're eating all the pulp and all the skins and all of the everything. Eat the whole thing. When you eat the apple, don't peel it. You're getting so many good of these beautiful little polyphenols, the flavors, the smells, all these things that go towards turbocharging the gut microbiome, also killing off overpopulated bacteria in the gut, so keeping them at bay. And all these skins, these are poisons and things that they have naturally occurring, which are really good for our gut microbiome to keep them in check, because they might poison off overpowering bugs in the gut. And then what we can do is eat with the seasons, eat what's fresh, eat what's local. We could also, I'll say it anyway, we could also look at this in terms of the way that we create our supplement ranges too. We might have a protein powder that is great for summer, and then we might have one that's winter version, and that's different, and you're getting a different set of prebiotics, because that's what food is at the end of the day. It's a prebiotic. It's going to feed the gut microbiome and the bacteria. And if we can make it diverse and we can change it, so you might like to go fire for a month, and you might have to go ice for a month, and then you might have to go back, and we might create something different or in between. So you can change up the different types of prebiotics that you're putting in, whilst you're also supplementing like you should be doing with your natural whole food, plant-based diet. In essence, you can do it with your supplement range as well, which is what we're looking into now.
Game changing. I think the more people become educated, not only on gut microbiomes and in gut health in general, and how much your gut health plays a role in so much more of your life, specifically your mental health, right? I think that's a topic that we're going to see to unravel a lot more in the upcoming years. But also, I can't tell you how many people I hear say, whey protein kills my stomach, but I need to get that protein in, right? So I think between the education and products such as this coming out, I think we're going to start to see that shift even more so than we have in recent years, which is awesome.
100%. And if something's not working out and over a chronic period of time in your stomach, maybe it's not so good. And typically when you add in a lot of new plant-based foods to the diet, you might see a little bit of a reversal. You might feel bad for an extra couple of weeks, where your stomach starts to get in tune with how it's going, and it's experiencing things in the gut that it probably hasn't had for a very, very long time, if ever. So if your gut microbiome does not have the required bacteria to break down chickpeas, for instance, the only food I struggled with initially was chickpeas. Chickpeas used to make me bloat. After about 2 weeks, I used to do chickpeas every few days, maybe bloat a little bit, so I didn't have too much. Don't go overboard. Don't have half a can of chickpeas or whatever you're doing. Have a little bit, have a little bit more. And then the transition phase is fine. You'll get a little bit of a die-off phase, and you'll feel a little bit bad. You might feel a little bit gassy, but it will change. Give it like 21 days and you'll feel really good. It just takes time.
That's a really great piece of advice. If you've never been a runner, don't run a marathon tomorrow. If you have never been predominantly plant-based, don't try it immediately the next day, right? Start adding in those plants, slowly start that transition, slowly move away from meats, start swapping your foods out. Honestly, just start by adding more plants before you even take the meat away. Add 100%. Those plants onto your plate, and then start subtracting the meat if that's something that you're looking to do. One last piece while we have time, I do want to give this information to our triathletes out there. Talk about fueling for an Ironman. So like I said in the beginning of the podcast, you are going from strongman to CrossFit to now Ironmans, both 73 and full Ironmans. Talk about fueling for an Ironman as a plant-based athlete. Yeah,
so the cool thing is that I did the end of last year was I got to experience what it was like to do a strongman competition on the Saturday and then an Ironman 73 on the Sunday. So I did it in the one weekend. It was awesome fun. I was like so looking forward to it. And I signed up to the Ironman knowing that it was on the day after this strongman comp, just to see what it was like to lift something really heavy and awkward on one day multiple times and then go and try and do an Ironman triathlon. And it was great. It was so much fun. And fueling for those two things for me was, in essence, the same. It was making sure that I had enough fuel on board to sustain what I needed to output for it. I ended up having 2 tire blowouts in the triathlon, but aside from that, all of my times were record times across each leg, which was great if I was to take away the downtime getting tires changed. But fueling for an Ironman, for me, I'd worked with gels before, I'd worked with bars before, I'd worked with putting gels in my water, just water, adding carbohydrate powder to my water and stuff like that. And I used to get really crampy stomach. It'd get to the point where I would be like on the bike, not feeling great, get onto the run, feel very crampy in the stomach, and you just have to wait it out. You just have to keep ticking over and hopefully it goes away. And sometimes that would last 45 minutes. I remember in the full Ironman that we did in Bustleton in 2019, there was a 45-minute period there where I had just excruciating stomach cramp. And I was like, come on, man, you can do it. Keep going. It'll go away. It'll go away. It got to like 40 minutes. And this is never going away. 5 minutes later, it did go away. And what I've now decided to do is trying to make it as natural as possible. And that is just I use dates. Like I just did a marathon not long ago. I packed my pockets full of dates and I just had a date every 4 to 5 kilometers. Great. And it was fantastic. It was the best fueling I'd ever done. Recently, I just did an Ironman about a month ago, in Bustleton again, actually. And I loaded my bottles up with water. I added in some, I blended my dates, put them in my water, and then I had a bag of dates at my transition station, which I just took with me on my first part of the run. So when I was getting stuck into the marathon, I think I had 14 or 15 dates in there, and I just ate them over the course of like the first 6 kilometers, just ticking over at like 5:15 kilometer pace or 5:20 kilometer pace, and just ticked them over and just ate them as I went. When I felt good, just eat them along the way, and I honestly couldn't have felt any better. So the key factor here, if you just don't want to get any fitter, but you want to get a better time, focus heavy on hydration, focus heavy on your fueling, and have a schedule, plan it. This is like your daily routine with nutrition. If you do not plan what you're going to eat, you'll get stuck with what's most convenient. And with what's most convenient might not always be what's best for you. And this goes for when you're doing the race. There's aid stations there, but what's on the aid station might not work for you, which what I found out when I was eating whatever was on the aid station, it probably wasn't the best. And I got a stomach cramp like crazy. And for me, the dates worked. Stick with dates, plan it out, set it out. I have my watch set for a timer. Every 20 minutes, I had to eat something. And so every time it would just beep at me, cool, time to eat. And then I'll just be downing as much water as what I could handle before I felt, overfull on water. I'd also add electrolytes in there too. So sodium, I did a sweat test, checked out my sodium levels, how much sodium I was sweating out in an hour period in a sweaty session. And it worked out, it was like 1,100 milligrams or something like that per hour. And I did it with another person who was like 650. So there was a vast difference in how much we sweated our sodium, which was one of the key factors of our electrolyte blend. So making sure I was trying to get as much of that salt per hour back in, and you're probably never going to get all of it. And if you do get all of it, you'll probably get the runs pretty bad because that salt takes a toll on you, as you guys know.
Can you talk about the misconception around salt?
Yeah.
Right. Ooh, I feel like when most of us grew up, it was constantly no salt, take the salt off the table. Right.
Yeah.
But now we're finding extremely high levels of sodium deficiencies in this country.
Yeah.
Right. Or around the world rather. Right.
Yeah.
So tell us about it.
Yeah. So we need that salt. We need it for that. We are water, electricity. We're all these things. We need to make these contractions. And the thing that we still don't know yet, like, to the degree, I spoke about this on a podcast not long ago with a guy who is so genius in this space. And I said, tell me about salt and tell me about hydration and tell me about cramping. He goes, dude, we don't know. And I was just like, man, great. He goes, so they believe it's a They believe it's a ratio of where the salt sits inside extracellular and intracellular. And if those ratios are bumped out of whack, then that can trigger these responses like the cramping responses. So what I've noticed is when I don't take on salt and I'm only having water, I get crampy. If I don't have enough water, I get even more crampy. So water, I think, is number one. Add the salt in on top. And I wouldn't shy away from the salt to it. There is a degree where you would shy away. I'm not having electrolytes on a daily basis when I'm just going about my day. I probably won't even consume extra electrolytes unless I was training in a very, very humid climate like Bali. But if I'm just training day to day, I won't do electrolytes. But if I'm going to a race, I will definitely do electrolytes because I just want to make sure that I'm going to be covering my bases. And then if I'm training in very, very humid climates, I will probably have some extra electrolytes. This weekend in Miami, when we're competing, I'm definitely going to be having some electrolytes over the weekend. I've got some ready to rock and roll. But then it's to the degree where I want to make sure my sodium is the key factor that I'm getting back in, because over the course of that hour, we measured magnesium, we measured potassium, bugger all we're getting sweated out. They get recycled a lot. Gut microbiome does a lot for us there too. But sodium was the biggest key factor of loss. And that, I'm not telling people to go grab iodized table salt and chuck that in. If you can grab something else, that would be good. Something a little bit cleaner and purer, that's sweet. Sea salt's good. Celtic sea salt. But then you can find other people that have, created really good salt blends that just have really good, again, like protein, great ratios. And, for me, I'm looking for ones that are up around 300 milligrams plus per serving of sodium. That's what I'm looking for. If I see like 60 or 70 or 80, I'm like, it's not enough, because I've done that before and I've been cramping like hell. So I know that if I'm taking in good carbohydrates during my races, like dates and whatever else I can get my hands on that is similar to that. I usually do date bars. It has to be whole food date bars. I don't like anything with what am I going for here? Just almost like synthetic stuff, like the flavors and all that type of stuff. I just want just raw food. So if I'm getting carbohydrates, I'm getting in a really good sodium blend for my electrolytes, a good electrolyte blend there, and water throughout the whole race, and just set my alarm, set a structure. This is what works for me, and test that before you go to your race. Don't just go, cool, I'm going to train, I'm going to go to my race, and I'm going to do everything different. Don't do that. Test this out in the months leading up. Figure out what works best for you, because you might find that one carbohydrate powder that you want to put in your water works great. And then you might try another one and it's foul and it is not working with your guts at all. You do not want to have that one during your race. So test it out before you go. And this is all very intuitive. And this goes for everything. This goes for training. This goes for nutrition. This goes for hydration levels. This goes for electrolytes. This goes for protein. Everything is so individualized because everybody's gut microbiome is different. We're looking at a system that has 22,000 genes. So our body, human body, we have roughly 22,000 genes in our body. We're looking at our gut microbiome has, 10 times, we're up on the degree where we have so much more bacteria in our gut, so much more activity going in our gut on a genome level. And that's what makes us these super beings, that if we don't approach it with a gut first orientated approach, we're going to be doing ourselves a disservice. And if we want optimal performance, and everybody wants optimal performance, whether it's in sport or just cognitive function, then if we can approach it from gut first perspective, we're going to be doing a good thing for ourselves. So that's how I would approach it. What works for your gut? If it's off your gut, then yeah, don't be having it.
Wrapping up an amazing discussion here. Tell us what to expect for in 2023 for you, James.
2023 is going to be a big year. That I'm going to chuck my hand in the ring and go for it in as many different events as possible. I've got a CrossFit event this weekend. We have some Ironmans coming up. We've got a New Zealand Ironman, 70.3. We also have some adventure races. There's a 20K swim from a beach in Australia out to an island that I would love to do in a team. I don't know if I want to do that as a solo yet, but maybe in the coming years, but I'd like to do that as a team. I've got an idea of maybe running a weekend very similar to the one that I tested a couple of months back, and running a thing called maybe the Hybrid Games, and then doing a powerlifting competition and an Ironman and get some crew together and have a crack at that. But it'll be a big mix of marathons, half marathons, Ironmans, half Ironmans, strongman, powerlifting, Olympic lifting, CrossFit comps, adventure races. I'd love to do an ultra this year. I'd love to do a 100K. I'd love to do a 100K race. I'm kind of keen for everything. And a big long swim. Yeah, that'd be wild. So I'm kind of keen to do anything. Maybe, I don't know. And then maybe some other funky stuff that's got nothing to do with. It definitely is athletic, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe some high dives off some cliffs or something, or I don't know. I definitely want to get my skydive ticket. I went skydiving yesterday, and now I'm hooked. I want to do it every day. So maybe get my skydive ticket too and see how we go. But I'd like to go surf some cool waves this year as well. So try and get in some surfing too.
So in short, continuing to be the man that does it all in 2023.
Gonna try my best. Yeah.
James, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure it's the first of many. We're very excited to see what comes in our partnership together at Bodybuilding.com, and have all the success in the world in this new year.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for tuning into the BBCom podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes coming soon.
Yeah.